Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Coffee Time with Byron. I'm your host, Byron. Alongside me is current race car driver Ryan Martin, who will be with ARCA starting, I think, this year, you said. And who were you with before?
So before I ran in a lower series called the Spear Southwest Tour out here in California, and then working to do some ARCA stuff next year and maybe some other things we're trying to put together.
Sounds like a plan. Hey, you got to build somewhere, right? To get to the ultimate level, you got to build somewhere.
Exactly. 100%. It's a lot of hours behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see, but it's all part of building the dream, right?
Exactly. You got that right. So let's begin, shall we? Like we said, unfortunately, there isn't much on you. So let's get started with this. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what got you into racing. Tell us everything that you want us to know about the man, Ryan Martin.
Yeah, so originally from Canada, I moved down here to California a couple years ago to kind of pursue that racing stuff and continue the career. I started racing go karts when I was about 10 years old. Actually, I got my first go kart on my 10th birthday. And before that, I was into racing. My dad was into racing. Family just huge into racing.
Mhm.
No one ever raced before me. So I was kind of the first one in our family with that opportunity. So ended up going to a go kart race, watched a little bit of racing, fell in love with it, bought a go kart, and we were racing a couple weeks later. And then from there, just kept racing every year, building up, racing all around the world. And then from there, moved down here and kept doing the racing on the go kart stuff. And then I got my foot into the door with all the car racing stuff. So mainly been doing the like NASCAR ladder system. So we're doing late model, short track, moving up to ARCA, and from there you keep going trucks, Xfinity, and then hopefully one day the Cup Series. And then I also do car coaching on the side. And I work for racing schools, so teaching other people how to drive race cars too, which is always fun.
That is fun. Yeah, that is always fun because I always wondered how. I know, obviously, I know you obviously not only do you have to get a team, but you also have to build your own cars to. Well, that's in the independent circuit. You have to build your own
Yes.
car, but once you get higher up, you got to find your crew and all that. I think I'm not sure how that works, but I believe that's it. So take us through that process and how difficult that is, because I know growing up, you have to definitely, if you want to get into it, I wanted to, but I was like, I can't. I'm not. I don't have time and all that to put into building. But there's tons of work that's got to be done when coming up like that. I mean, what? Tell us through that experience and like growing up and all that, and having to do all that before reaching the ultimate goal of like having a team set, sponsors, whatever, and all that. I mean, tell us about that growing up. You because you it's like a long road where you have to start building yourself and running all by yourself, basically.
Yeah, so usually when you start out racing in like the lower series, so whether that's karting, dirt track racing, whatever it is, right? Usually you start out it's father son, right? So for us, it was my dad, my brother, and myself going to the racetrack on the race weekend. So, we a lot of time in the garage in the evening, prepping the
Mhm.
go karts, loading trailers, getting all that stuff ready to go race, and from there, if you want to do good in any sport at a high level, usually you try to align yourself with people that are really like well known or professionals in it, right? So from there, you try and find a coach, or in karting or cars, you'll find like a crew chief or a mechanic, right?
Right.
And they'll do a lot of, let's say, the prep work, making sure the equipment's ready to go, or at events working on the equipment, right? And then that allows you as a driver to focus on your job, which is driving, because there's a lot to it.
Right.
And that's kind of how like the karting stuff works, right? Then once you get to cars, and through karting too, you'll end up running with teams. So you have teammates under your team, and you'll show up. They'll have all the equipment ready, and you'll have your mechanic or crew chief with you throughout the weekend, and your job is just driving. And from there, when you go to the car stuff, you could do it two ways, right? You could build your own program up, which is buying your own cars, working on the cars, buying a trailer, and doing it all that way.
Hmm.
Or you could do the what they call in racing is kind of like arrive and drive. So basically, what that is, you bring the money, you write a check, and you show up to a track ready to race. And the team that you decided to run with they have everything supplied, prepared, ready to go. So your job as the driver is to go drive and go and focus on that, right? So for me with that, that's kind of the route I've gone in my car racing stuff. So my call it average week is working my day job, and then in the evenings raising sponsorship money, and then we show up to the track on the race weekend, and the team shows up with all the equipment, the car is ready, they run it, they have all the guys, and my job is just driving. So I guess that's kind of how that works. And then once you get to the higher levels of motorsports, it's essentially the same thing, right? Like all those drivers, their job is just to focus on driving or whatever entails that. So whether that's sim time, driving in the simulators, staying in shape, fitness, doing press, media, all that stuff. And you have all those guys at the shop, truck drivers, crew chiefs, mechanics, you name it, working on this stuff. And when you get to that really high level too, they have management or people working in offices raising the sponsorship money for you. So for me right now, like I raise all my own sponsorship money, but down the road, it's something that we trying to get on our team is a person or a team that they can solely dedicate to that. So then it allows me to focus on what I'm good at doing, which is driving a race car.
How tough is it to get sponsors? Like, I know for me, I know it's tough. Personally, for me, it's tough because I'm trying to get sponsors to help me with this show, but it's tough.
Hmm.
So, me personally, I know how tough it is. For those listening out there, which I know it ain't much right now, but for those that do eventually see this or grow into this that I'm trying to build, tell us about that process and how to go through it, and basically what I'm trying to ask is how do you get the sponsors, shall
Yes.
I
So,
ask? If that, for me, I know it's hard because I'm still trying to get sponsors myself.
mhm. So you kind of hit the nail on the head there, right? When you're starting out, um, it's really hard because they call it your brand recognition isn't that big, right? And my job and your job as a podcast host is to build that brand recognition. And as the brand recognition builds, it's easier to get called sponsorship, or we call them partners, right? Partnerships. So if you look at racing,
Right.
for example, Dale Earnhardt Jr., probably the most known race car driver in America. For him to get sponsorship money, super not easy,
Right.
but it's a lot easier than a guy like myself or you, just because he has that brand recognition. So the hard thing is in racing is it takes a lot of
Right.
money to be able to do everything, right? It's super expensive sport, and you need money to do that, which means you need sponsors. And when you're starting out, like I said, it's hard to get that without that brand recognition. So you just keep trying and trying. I've been super lucky, moving down here and meeting a good group of people that really believe in the talent and the journey and the story that I'm trying to protrude. So if you're able to get the right people behind you and take that, call it risk, you know, down, it makes it easier to get your foot going. And then from there, you kind of build on it, right? And after that, it's just, you got to find kind of your niche market in a sense. Like, okay, this is the people that we're appealing to or trying to sell to. And from there, you can kind of narrow down like people or companies that you can potentially aim for sponsorship. So for us, like we know that in motorsports, a lot of the fans they enjoy beverages on the weekend, right? Because they go to the
Right.
races, they're drinking. So for
Yeah.
me, exactly right. Or like when you go to any sporting event, right? You go to a football game, a hockey game, baseball game, you're gonna have a beer or a drink while you watch, right?
Right.
So you'll see, like for us, like one of my sponsors is a great company from Canada and Canada and the US, and they do alcohol importation, distribution, and all that fun stuff. So we're able to align with a company like that. Dram Hunters is the one subsidiary that they sponsor us through. So like that worked out. Then, most people that watch racing, for us, for example, right, are car enthusiasts. So like last year we had Napa Auto Parts on board because that's kind of their market. So you kind of identify and find those markets that align or what you're trying to build. So like for us this year, we're focused on building our social media platforms because at the end of the day, that is a big way of how you grow your, call it, value that you sell to sponsors. And without that value, it's really hard. So if you go to a sponsor and let's say you have 100,000 Instagram or TikTok followers. It's way easier to sell something to them than instead of having like 5,000. So we were able to kind of work alongside OnlyFans this year, which helped us, and it helped them too because it brings a new market of people onto their platform. So it kind of coincides, and we both grow and learn and work and build from it. So that's kind of like, I guess, part of it. There's so much to it, and I'm still always trying to get better and learn. Um, because once you become a student of, let's say, the sport or whatever business or industry you're trying to succeed in, that's how you really get really talented at it. So for me, like, I'm always trying to get better at everything, whether it's the driving, the fitness, the business side of it, the media side, getting new partnerships, sponsorships, all that stuff. So it's just, there's so much to it, and there's no like one way of doing it. That's like the one thing when people come into it, they're like, oh, I got to send this like proposal, this deck out, and I'll get a sponsor. If it was that easy, everyone would be doing it, right? There's a lot of research that goes into it, trying to align
Yeah,
yourself with the right
for
partners.
sure.
But then also, there's a million different ways you can build a partnership, right? You could have one guy that has toothpaste and another guy that has a grocery store. And if you can somehow put them together where that grocery store sells that guy's toothpaste, well, now they both are gaining from that, and they're entitled to help you because they're making profit off that as well. So it's kind of like one way that works in the racing world.
Yeah,
But
you couldn't have said anything better. I mean, it is tough. You're right, because I'm my own person, as you can tell. I just produce, I do everything, so it's hard. It literally is. Like you said, it's tough, man. It really is. And I don't have much of a following. I'm still trying to work at that. As you see, my freaking logo right now, I'm surprised that I will if I get bigger. I'm going to have to change the logo, of course, obviously, because that's a Cartoon Network show. If you don't see, if I know you've seen the logo, Coffee
it
Time
looks, yeah, it
is
looks
from
familiar.
Adventure Time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to have to change that if it gets bigger. But regardless, it's really tough,
It's,
and I'm trying my best, but it's just
yeah.
hard.
It's
It
hard
really,
when,
it really is.
yes. It's hard when you're a one man band, right? Because there's only so many hours in the day. And when you're starting out, you probably still have a regular day job. So cancel half your day out, and then you only have a
Yeah.
couple hours a day that you could actually work on your dream or whatever project you're working on. And there's a lot to it. It's like your end, right? There's production, media, trying to get some kind of partners on board so then you can maybe not work as much and you can put more time into your product to make it better. And that's the same thing that with us and like with me in the racing, right? So for me, like, then the year I'm moving to Charlotte, North Carolina, and my reason I'm moving out there is, one, all the racing, all the NASCAR stuff is based out of there, but I have the opportunity to go
Right.
work with a company that specializes in sponsorship stuff, and it will allow me to 20 or 16, 18 hours a day, whatever you name it, focus on building my program, building my dream. So,
So I gotta ask you. Obviously, you said you're from Canada. I gotta ask you. I haven't met or heard any Canadians. No, none offense to the Canadians, but
yeah.
I gotta ask. You got a good accent, Southern accent. How'd you manage
So,
that coming from Canada?
so I never really had the, call it, stereotypical Canadian accent. Like, I grew up in a big city up in Canada, and my parents are actually from South Africa. So me growing, like, they moved to Canada, and I was born there a year later. So I think just
Hmm.
being in that household as well. But then also growing up, traveling a lot with the racing, spent a lot of time down here in the States. I never really built that, call it, accent up. Yeah, growing up playing hockey, you'll learn some of the lingo, but just for me, I naturally pick up accents quicker as well. So I see some of the Canadians that come down here racing, and I'm like, because I'm so used to, like, call it the American or where I'm from in California, like, not even accent but lingo, and then you hear those guys, you're like, whoa, it's like I'm in an episode of Letterkenny right now. So that's why I never picked that up.
I know, but yeah, I would think you were Southern the way you have your
Yes.
accent.
And especially being in, call it, the NASCAR world and trying to do that, a lot of those guys are Southern, call it, country boys. So you kind of pick that up a little bit too, and
Yeah,
that probably makes me sound a little more like them, which isn't a bad thing. So especially if that's like the
right,
main demographic of what you're trying to accomplish, right?
right. So obviously, your dad's been a big part, like you said, growing up and being a part of what he got you into racing. Um, your first professional race, I believe, would be ARCA because that's professional wise in the
So
NASCAR circuit because I believe it's a family of thing, right? NASCAR is ARCA and then truck and then
yeah,
the
yeah. So
Bush
our
or what used to be Bush and
yeah,
now yeah.
yeah.
So are you going to have is it your first race there? Your father's going to be there?
Oh yeah. So basically how that whole ladder system works, I'll break that down really quickly. So under NASCAR, they have like the Cup Series, which is top one, the second one is Xfinity, and then Trucks
Right.
is the third.
Third,
ARCA
yep.
is its own series, but they align with NASCAR in a sense. So they're not the same company, but they're basically the same company, if that makes sense, right?
It is because
Um,
it is to me that is because I've seen growing up, I don't know about now, but a
mhm.
lot of NASCAR drivers did ARCA. A
Yes.
lot of well-known names when I was growing up, from Mark
Yes.
Martin, Dale Jarrett, Earnhardt, both the Earnhardts actually.
Yes.
All the big names did it. I don't know
Yeah.
about now, but yeah,
They
that's why I'm asking you if it's still a part of NASCAR.
Yes. So they still are. Like back in the day, it was they just go through different series names and maybe slightly different ownership groups, but it's still like call it aligned with NASCAR. The stuff I was doing before, like the late model stuff in the Southwest Tour, that's also still considered a professional race series. There's a lot of guys in the country that race short track stuff like that every week or every other week, and that's their job, you know. It's cars look similar, they drive different, just different type of racing. But that's still, I guess you could say, considered a professional race series because there are guys they're getting paid, and the payout money there as well is really nice. So, um, I guess you could say technically like that stuff was professional racing as well. But I get where you're coming from the ARCA stuff and getting on that bigger scale of trying to do that.
Now, honestly, from how I don't know how it was with you. You can tell us how it was with you. But do you have to get scouted to get into those? How does that process work? Do you get scouted or do you contact these
Yeah.
people? How's it work? How's that whole process work to get into that level?
To the ARCA stuff. Or I guess to get into anything, right? Like at the end of the day, it takes money. So those teams need money to be able to run that program. So however they get that money, whether that's you bringing your sponsors with you, or some people, some kids go through like a shootout or like a scholarship program, and then let's say they'll sign like a scholarship with Ford or Toyota or Chevy, and then those manufacturers will take them on as a development driver role, and then they'll kind of like cover the cost and align you with their partners at those levels, the teams that they work with. That's kind of how they do that. And once you have that, let's say, either like those guys, they have that way of doing it. For us, most of us out there trying to build the stream, um, we just bring our sponsorship money, and you do your research and you find out, um, okay, this is like the way they do it is, let's say you have a winning team or a winning car, then there's a top 5 team, a top 10 team, top 15, 20, and basically, and not like discrediting those lower teams, but basically the higher you go up on that, so like let's say the difference between a top 10 car and a winning car,
Mhm.
maybe the winning team has more resources and they put smarter people, or they have smarter people, and their equipment's just better, right? So that car is expected to win, whereas a top 10 car, if you get a top 10, that's like a win for those people. And the difference with that is there's a very big, call it financial difference. Your top team compared to a top 10 team could be double the budget. So like for us this year, our budget per race almost tripled, going from that mid-pack team to the best in the country.
Not bad. Not bad.
Yeah. So for me, going to raise, let's say, financially, just pulling numbers out, instead of raising 10 grand a week, now I got to raise 30 grand a week.
Now, I know they did this back when I was growing up, the ARCA series. I know they raced at the NASCAR level tracks that the
Hmm.
NASCAR drivers drove, if that is indeed what they still do, which I'm pretty sure it
Yeah.
is, what track are you looking forward to racing the most and why?
So I grew up racing road courses, like lefts and rights, kind of stuff like that. Not huge in the oval stuff until I moved here and started doing the NASCAR stuff. So I honestly probably say the track I look most forward to racing on is Sonoma Raceway, which is in my backyard here up in Northern California.
Right?
We were supposed to run with them this year and do an ARCA race there, but I had an injury, so couldn't do that. But I'd say probably Sonoma just because it's my home track. I got a lot of laps there, and it's a fun track. It's like driving a roller coaster, and it's what my niche is growing up, so I know I do really well on it.
And which one the least?
I don't really know if there's one I'd least looking forward to. I like all the stuff. There's other tracks like if you look at the oval stuff, there's a lot of oval tracks I want to go do as well. I don't really think I have a track that I'm least looking forward to yet. Maybe once you guys do some of those tracks, you're like, maybe I don't like this one as much or whatever. But for me right now, like Sonoma's the top, but after that, there's so many other great places. I'd love to go run for the old stuff like Bristol, which they're actually racing there this weekend. I think the Xfinity race is going on right now. Bristol is like on that bucket list. So like
They
ovals
are.
on
Yep.
a race that. Then you got Daytona, Talladega, all those big drafting tracks. There's so many great tracks that they go to.
Now you briefly just brought up to uh, the Bristol and Martinsville. How would you tackle those course? How would you tackle those racetracks as a driver yourself personally? Because it's speed on speed on speed, so little small space.
Yes.
How would you, as a driver, you're going to battle those courses? How would you take on that challenge of those courses?
So the nice thing is with the type of stock car, with the Southwest Tour, right? The late models racing, the biggest tracks we go on are half mile ovals, which are what Martinsville and Bristol are. So it's kind of what I'm doing right now. It's very like close quarters, tight racing. We raced in our series at a track earlier this year. It's a quarter mile oval, and there's 20, 25 cars. So you're very busy.
Mm.
From the driving aspect, it's very what I'm used to, which is using brake to get the car slowed down, get the car turned, kind of coming from that road course background and especially go-karting, right? So like those types of ovals where you do have that deceleration like Martinsville, it would really benefit my skill set I've built over my life. And then for the races, it's just, stay calm. It's a long race. You can't go out there and try win it in the first corner. You got to be a little careful at the beginning, get a little bit of space, but you can't be too nice because, when you go run Martinsville or Bristol, it's 500 laps. And I don't think a lot of people realize how hard that is. And even like with our
Literally.
short track stuff, right? Like, let's say it's a 60 or 80 lap race, that could be a 20 to 40-minute race. And you have someone talk because you can't really see in those cars. You can't see left, right. You can just see straight forward. So you have what they call a spotter, which standing up above overhead,
Right.
telling you what's going on around you, telling you if there's a car next to you or whatever, because you can't
Above.
see that
Yep.
stuff. And it's extremely
Yep.
mentally draining.
Yep.
Like after one of those races,
Right.
I feel like I just wrote a 10,000 word essay. Like my brain is fried. So for those races, it's just, be calm, cool, collected, be patient, and get to the end and then see what you got and just try and that's a big thing of the physical side of stuff, right? Staying in good, like your fitness level. A lot of people see, oh, you're just in a car turning and that's easy. Well, it's really hot in those cars and you're in there for a long time, right? So once you start to get physically
And there's
tired,
no
well, the
AC. Yeah,
first
like you said.
no AC, you're in a fire suit. It's not like a nice, comfortable, air conditioned vehicle. The motor's right in front of you. Your feet. A lot of times in those races, your feet get hot. They go numb. So you're driving with numb feet, and when you start to get physically tired, the first thing that goes is your focus. And that's how you make mistakes. And then that's when you crash race cars. So, doing that training and going to the gym and getting on the bike or whatever kind of fitness training you're doing is really important so that you don't have those so that doesn't happen, right? And like for us, like a good way of kind of stimulating that is, hopping in a simulator and go and do a 3-4 hour race at Martinsville on a sim. Some people see it as, it's just a video game. Well, it can be a really great training tool to help stimulate and train your mind so that that you're just used to that and focused. And like a lot of times too in racing is even in the go-kart stuff, you forget to breathe. And if you're not breathing, you're not getting oxygen through your body and you get tired really quickly. So there's so many little things you got to remember on the fitness side of stuff while you're driving, drinking water, so that you can stay sharp and focused on your job.
Now, what? Now, you obviously. I'm not going to ask you about the road courses because you mastered that. You were in that. I'm not going to ask. We already went through the short tracks of Bristol and Martinsville and all
Yes.
that. Now, tell us, how would you tackle the bigger tracks like Talladega, Daytona, Texas, which I forget what that speedway is called.
That's Texas Motor Speedway.
Pocono, which is a big old triangle.
Mhm.
The Arizona one. Yeah,
Yes.
Las Vegas. How would you tackle those? Because I know that's a whole different mindset too, because you're going literally five wide, and you can on those tracks.
Yes.
So take us through that and how you would tackle those.
Yeah, so if you have like, Talladega, Daytona are their own breed, right? So for those tracks, they call it pack racing. So you're in a big pack, drafting, using the air, manipulating the air to your advantage, right? When you drive down the freeway and you drive past a semi rig and how it buffers your car, the wind does. Well, when you get in those big packs, it's like that times 1,000, that force on the car. So for that stuff, a lot of it is just, you know, realistically, once we're qualifying, you're going around there wide open, but you're trying to be as smooth and not try and scrub speed. No like aggressive movements on the steering wheel. But once you get into the racing of that stuff, it's just patience, really looking far ahead, reading what's going on, taking the information that's being told to you by your spotter, what's going on around you, and watching what's going on. You're looking through the front windshield, but you're also looking through the rear view mirror more than you are looking out front. And with that stuff, it's just, a lot of people watch NASCAR, those races to go watch for the big crash, the big one they call it. So you just want to make sure you're in the right place at the right time where you're not in that. And then when you go to tracks where, let's say it's like you said, a Las Vegas, Pocono, Michigan's another one. Those tracks are just as fast as Daytona or Talladega, multi-line, multi-groove racing. As the tires wear out, the car gets a little loose or it starts to slide more. And with those, it's, the car setup is everything in oval racing. You got to have a really good car if you want to win. So your job throughout the race is to communicate with your crew chief. And when you come to those pit stops during cautions, they can make minor adjustments on the car to give it more grip, take grip out, try and make the car easier to drive so that you can go faster. And with those tracks, like you said, like Michigan or Las Vegas, just pull those belts tight and send it, I guess, almost at one point.
Now, I got to ask you, is it true what I've seen in races and past on the big tracks like that, when you got teammates literally right up on each other's asses, does that really help the centrifugal force, like the announcers and everybody says? Does that really help the race cars go faster?
Yeah. So basically what happens is when you're in those big packs, right? The front row, let's say they're full throttle, right? But they're pushing the air out of the way. So, if you're full throttle by yourself, you can only go so fast. Well, that car behind you, because the front car is punching a hole in the air.
Mm-hmm.
So the car behind it doesn't have all that drag from the air resistance going over the car. So it sucks up to the back of that car. And once you start pushing it, it's just more power. It's like hitting nitrous. So now you get a couple cars in a row, and that very last car has almost no drag on it from the air resistance, and it's just more engines, more horsepower pushing that train forward. So if you watch back in the day, qualifying lap at Daytona where cars driving around by itself, top speed 187, maybe 190 miles an hour, right? Then, or growing up playing the NASCAR games, the older ones, and then you're in a pack racing, see 200, 205 miles an hour down the straight because you're in that pack pushing, catching up, using that draft to your advantage.
I always thought that was I always thought they were dogging me or something when I heard the announcers say that, but I guess that legitimately is true. I mean, have you have, in all your races, either dirt or whatever in your car, have you done that yourself? Have you gone behind somebody and it's helped you win races? Does it?
So we've,
So
believe it or not, we've done that in everything down to even go-karting. There's that draft. And some of those big go-kart tracks, if you come on the straight and you're, let's say, behind a teammate and he's racing a guy, and now you have two cars in front of you punching a bigger hole for you to come.
mhm.
When you line up on your teammate, or if your teammate lines up on you and he gives you a push, it's like hitting that nitrous button. You got the extra 5 more, 10 more horsepower, and it just helps you get ahead. So I've done it everywhere from, go-karts to car racing.
So when you do get, because I know you will, you've done all this work. You've already made ARCA, which is part of NASCAR, like we've talked about.
Hmm.
I believe, truly believe, you will make it to that level. You because you're the way you're set, your mindset. You've managed it so far. You will get there. So what drivers are you looking forward to meeting that you have yet to meet so far when you get
So,
up to that level?
so I've been very lucky just with my connections, and being super friendly and outgoing and open with people. To When you go to, like, when those big NASCAR races come in town, to meet a lot of really cool people, right? So I've met a lot of drivers in the Cup Series, Xfinity, all those higher up series, and then with the ARCA stuff, a lot of those kids are people that maybe I've raced against before in go karts, or at some point in our, like with the Southwest Tour, raced against some of those guys. So it's not like there's anyone that you really want to desperately meet yet, because I've been lucky enough to meet a lot of them. I'd say probably, if you look at North American racing wise, the driver that I'd love to meet the most is probably Tony Stewart. Growing up, he's the guy that got me interested in racing as a kid, and watched him, and he was always my favorite driver. But, like, earlier this year, they had a tire test at Sonoma Raceway for NASCAR. So they bring out one team from each manufacturer. So you had Stuart Haas for Ford, Trackhouse for Chevy, and then Toyota was Joe Gibbs Racing. Well, I because of my connections with Toyota and running a Toyota late model, I
Right.
hung out with Toyota all day. So I hung out all day with the Joe Gibbs guys and Martin Truex Jr. So you got to pick their brain and listen to them, and when they come back for that race, then hey, well, come hang out, watch the race with us, and stuff like that. So I've been very fortunate to meet a lot of really cool people.
So it basically depends on who you're with, honestly, manufacturer wise, who you're with. Is
Yeah,
that what you're trying to say?
and
Because I know
yeah,
I know with
it
Chevy, it's with Hendricks,
yes.
uh, Childress, and I think there's one other one too.
Trackhouse,
Yeah,
College, those are and Spire are your main Chevy guys in the top series. And you don't have to be, like, affiliated with anyone. Like, I'm not affiliated with Toyota just because I run their product. That you see another, let's say, San Francisco 49ers fan, and let's say you're in Boston, you might hang out and have a drink with the guy, right? There's that mutual connection.
right.
So for us, like, that's kind of how I put my foot in that door. But also, all those guys are just racers, super cool people. So you go up and say hi and talk to them, and if they have an opportunity to talk and tell them what you're trying to do, a lot of them are willing to help you and let you listen in.
Now I've seen races before and grown up. Tell me about this as a racer yourself. Now I've heard this thrown out a bunch of times too, cheating wise. Now tell us the inspection of a race car and what is needed, especially in your suit, which will be NASCAR eventually. What requires, or any league, what is the dynamic of them getting checked, and what is that definition form of cheating, as they say? Is drivers trying to get an upper hand? What is the deal and all that? From because
So
I've seen races like that in the past.
yeah, so a lot of time the drivers don't even really know what's going on with the car. So if there's something that's a little funky, most of the time they don't know. It's probably better that way.
Hmm.
And depending what series or how deep they go in tech, but a lot of times, each series has the rule book, right? So for us, when you show up to a race, they roll a car through inspection. So they put body piece, like, these, call it big metal templates, over the body of the car to make sure that the body's within specs for all those aerodynamics advantages. But then also they'll look through the car really quick. They'll look over the motor, make sure the right seal numbers are on it, and if there's something, like, really fishy, then they do have the authority to really rip your stuff down and really inspect it. But usually when you show up, you roll through the templates, they'll inspect the car, make sure, certain safety aspects are correct as well. Check certain parts that are like call it pinpoints on their rules. Then you roll over a scale pad, they make sure the car is the right weight and also the offset of the weight left to right, front to rear has to be within a certain window. So they check that stuff and once you roll through there, um, it's once you roll through there, you're good. But there are people that have been very creative in the past that have done stuff, and you can and a lot of people can tell if something's up. Like you hear back in the day with the Michael Waltrip guys running jet fuel. So you notice those cars are way quicker, or they could smell it. And a lot of the guys that do the tech, call it in racing, were racers too, and they've been around the sport for a really long time, so they know when something's up. It's they know the sport just as good as anyone else, so you can kind of tell when something's off, and then from there they can just kind of keep looking into it, and trying to figure out what's going on.
Now
But
with it,
also at
go
the
ahead.
same time, you know, sometimes it's not cheating, and that sounds funny to say, right? Sometimes it's maybe how the rule is written. There's a loophole in that rule, and it's the series job to rewrite that rule so that whatever possibility or whatever's happening can't happen. I've heard stories of guys back in the day doing things where with tire pressures, which they set the series sets the tires. Well, if you change the tire pressures, it's going to give you an advantage or disadvantage. So there
Mhm.
were ways that guys were doing it and they weren't getting caught. And if the series can't catch that, well, then that's kind of on the series' fault as well. And that's kind of how motorsports is. They don't really call it cheating. You find a loophole and you keep going. So that's kind of how they look at it from inside the sport, and that's kind of like the called the ingenuity and the creativity, and some of it is finding those loopholes and making the most of it because the rules are so like spec and very tight. It's not like there's a big window where you can go like do crazy stuff.
I
And
got.
that's why there's some guys that get paid a lot of money, and that's why you pay a lot more money to go run to those top five or winning teams because they know all those loopholes and they execute it very well where you can't tell.
So going into your first ARCA race, like you said, next year, do you already have a crew? How
So
how? So do you have a crew set up? Do you set that up, or
so
again,
basic
as you said, does the league set that up for you?
so basically we set that all up ourselves. So I'm right now figuring out who I'm going to run with next year and exactly which ARCA series because there's technically three. There's a East, a West, and then they call it the National Series. So right now we're trying to figure out which series we want to do, or if we want to do certain events from all the different series to get more, kind of more experience and also more brand recognition in different markets. Because for us, a lot of my recognition right now is on the West Coast and in Canada. So, maybe it'd be cool to, instead of doing 10 races in California, do four races in California and then do one in Florida, one in New York, one in North Carolina, stuff like that. So right now my job is before the end of the year. And also on top of that, they haven't released any of the schedules yet. So that is also a big they use that we can't really make a decision where we're racing or who we're running with yet until we know when those races are. So once you get that stuff kind of figured out, then it'll be a little bit easier to be like, okay, let's go do this race here, or let's just commit to this whole series. Um, and with the one management firm I'm working with next year, they want to also try to get us into maybe a truck race or an Xfinity race. Kind of depending that stuff depending on hey we're able to secure this sponsor for an event of this value. These are your options. Which one do you want to go run?
Now, you as a driver, obviously, you've been through a lot growing up, and you're growing up in racing. You've been through a lot of accidents and crashes. Take us through that whole experience of a crash. How calm do you have to be through that? What do you got to do? Because I've seen they've taken you through that, especially NASCAR. They've done a good thing of it, taking you through the driver's instinct and their vision with cameras of what happens in a crash. Now, tell us, how scary is it, and how do you stay so calm in instances to get out of that from making it a much worse wreck? If you get what I'm trying to say.
Yes. So the nice thing about the race car stuff is, you know, those cars are very safe, and we're so securely strapped in there, that when stuff happens, it's, a lot of times you see those guys hop out nowadays and they're totally fine. If you watch any of the NASCAR stuff, especially recently, like, Daytona, they had some pretty gnarly wrecks and flips. So it's, obviously it's still a dangerous sport. So you kind of take that on the chin and you realize that's what you're trying to do. And it's nothing you ever think about, right? You never think about crashing a race car, because if you're thinking about that, you're probably going to crash because you're not
Right.
focused on your job.
Right.
But, stuff does happen, when there's a lot of cars out there, and, a lot of times people are fighting for that same piece of asphalt. So, I haven't had too many gnarly ones. I had one last year at the beginning of the year, where the car ended up backing into a wall, into a concrete wall on the inside of the track, and it moved that concrete wall back 3 feet. And it kind of sounds funny saying this, but once you're about to crash or you're in that accident, it kind of like goes in slow motion. So you kind of like, you're like, oh, this is gonna hurt, and then you kind of wait a second, and then it happens. So mine backing into the wall, um, wasn't too bad. I had a little bit of back pain the next day, but they kind of went away. But some other people, when you see them going to the wall really hard, it's a big shunt. You see now, like, the top level NASCAR guys, they have mouth guards that they wear while they're driving, and it has a sensor in it. And I think I heard, was it 2 weeks ago, Kyle Larson's wreck was 43, 44 G's when it peaked.
Mhm.
So you just kind of embrace it, get the hand, you want to get your hand off the steering wheel, because if the front end hits, it will rip the steering wheel out of your hand, and it can break your thumbs or break your wrists. That does happen. So you kind of just get your hands off the wheel, make sure your belts are tight, and kind of wait. So, and what I didn't realize, and you don't realize it until you think about it, or if you've been in it, but those race cars are extremely loud, right? Especially inside the things. We have these molded earpieces. There's ear muffs built into your helmet. All this stuff, right, to try to cancel noise. And when your spotter's talking on the radio, you have your radio cranked, and you can barely hear the guy talking in the car. But if you're standing outside and you have that on, it's like deafening to your eardrums, right? So if you ever watch a racing crash on board, you hear the motor, the sound of that is created when the car hits the wall is so loud. It drowns everything else out. And you don't realize that, like, you're just like, you watch it on TV, you're like, eh. But when you're in the car and you hear that, wah, it is like way louder than the car. So I found that kind of interesting when that happened. I'm like, huh, I never thought about that.
Now, tell us, have you, in your short time racing to where you have to now, how many close races have you been in, and how many of those have you actually won where you came that close?
So a lot of the really close finishes came in go-karts. Not as many in the car stuff. A lot of it came in go-karts. I think we had a go-kart race where the top three was 9 thousandths of a second, which is like maybe an inch.
Yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
that. Yep, in the
So
pros. Yep.
yeah, so that's kind of like that. In the oval car stuff, I haven't had anything hella close like that. So luckily we've luckily well, like with the oval stuff, because how the races are, usually there's not those, like, call it green white checkers, where it's like a mad dash at the end. So usually at the end of our races, it's been like a 20 lap run, so that everyone's kind of spaced out a little bit. But
Yes.
I've had it like qualifying, right, where we had a race earlier this year, and I think we qualified fifth, and I made a mistake in qualifying, which kind of bit me in the butt, and we lost, call it a tenth on that mistake. If I and we qualified fifth, and I think we were 8 thousandths off a pole. So top five cars, eight. There's like nine, or I think the top 10 was like less than a tenth of a second. Which, trying to measure that is insane.
Now tell us about the flags. We obviously know, everybody knows the basic ones. Obviously, green is go, yellow is caution, red is stop.
Yes.
Checkered is obviously checkered for finish. White is the last lap. But there
Yes.
are other flags too that
Yes.
I'm confused on myself. So, what are the other flags,
So
and what do they mean in a race?
So it depends on the race series, because, like, if you do, whether it's karting or the NASCAR stock car stuff, or if you go formula cars or sports cars, a lot of the different flags have different meanings. blue flag generically, if you see a blue flag, that means like you're about to get lapped down. So blue flag is a lapped car, so it's kind of a warning that hey, the leaders are coming. You want to get out of the way or give them some space, right? Don't
Mhm.
race them too hard. So that one's kind of generic across the board. Black flag means you did something wrong. Get off the track. They want to talk to you, right? You're getting disqualified. Or sometimes some series it'd be like they could have a black with like maybe a white triangle or a meatball on it,
Mhm.
which means that there's something mechanical that you need to come off track and fix right away. And then from there, like some series they have like weird flags where it's like red and yellow like stripes, and that would be like there's like it's kind of like a warning where there's like hey there's like fluid on the track like some oil or whatever. Not saying it's a caution, but just kind of be aware of that.
Is there one?
So
Is there one for weather? Because I think I've seen in NASCAR they had one for weather, but I don't know what
so
it is.
I don't know what exactly it is, but they might throw that like red and yellow like caution, slippery surface or some kind of substance or fluid on track flag. Um, and then the other flag is a red flag, which I think you said that was stop. Like something seriously happened, they'll group everyone up
Yeah.
and kind of pull them over somewhere and figure out what they got to figure out. So those are like the main flags I'd say across the racing stuff. Like I said, some series like NASCAR, they might have a flag for whatever water, if it's raining. Formula One might have a unique flag for something, or IndyCar or sports car racing. They're all kind of different when it comes to some of those flags.
Now, obviously, we all know every race fan knows about it. What happened with Earnhardt Sr. and what
Yep.
happened there? It was a fluke accident. Do you honestly think the Hans device? I know it's different nowadays, what because more technology and all that is safer now for the drivers.
Hmm.
Hans device that was newly tested, newly whatever. Do you honestly think that either way still could have saved his life if he would have just worn it? Because they were just newly coming out at the time
Yeah.
of that wreck.
And that's a hard one to say, right? Because there's so many rumors of like what people think happened, and realistically, no one really knows what happened leading up to, let's say, the actual impact. But I do think that if there was a Hans device on there, it would have made a difference. I'm not saying he would have saved him or he would have hopped out totally fine, but it would make a difference because basically the point of the Hans device is when you're in those race cars, your whole body's strapped down where your body can't move, but your head's
Right,
floating around, right?
right,
So what was happening was back in the day when those cars would have those head-on impacts, well, your body stops, but your head keeps going, and your head's not connected to your spine that great. So without
right.
saying it, you can see what happens. So I do think that it would have made a difference. Whether it would have saved his life or he would have been fine and hopped out, that's hard to say. But
Now, my
but now,
step my step grandfather knew right away as soon as it happened that I don't know how he could tell, but he knew right away that something was wrong, that
yeah.
he was possibly going to die. Now, you watching up, growing up in the sport, seeing that wreck, which I knew we all did you think he was dead, or did you think he would come out unscathed?
So I actually never saw that live because I was maybe 2.5 years old. So that was even before I knew what racing or watched racing.
Mhm.
So obviously I've seen all the footage after. And my opinion on the footage after is kind of biased because I see the stuff now and I know something like that they would get out safe, right? Because I see the same thing happen now modern day, or even growing up, and those guys would hop out safe. But
Right.
definitely was not a good angle. It was a hard hit, and it's not something you want to see ever. So I never really had that like, oh, is he okay or not? Because one, I already kind of knew the outcome, right? It's like watching a movie, the end, it kind of spoiled it in a sense. But also, like, you're also kind of like, oh, he's fine because I just saw that happen last week with Ryan Blaney or Kyle Larson, and they were fine. So it's hard for me to answer that question just because I didn't see it live.
You know what's funny is I saw it live with my step grandfather because I was heavily involved in racing at the time because I knew a lot of people
Yeah.
growing up. I knew a lot of them because my favorite was, believe it or not, Dale Jarrett.
Oh, hell yeah.
I
Yep.
knew a lot of the drivers than I do now because I don't really watch it that much
Yes.
anymore. looking at it live like I did, I mean, at first it looked like just a regular wreck. Like he didn't hit hard or nothing. But as soon as my step grandfather was taking me through it, because he was a big Dale Earnhardt fan. That's how he knew
Yes.
something was wrong. He watched his career from the very beginning and everything. That's why he didn't like when they made that Earnhardt movie. If you remember, he hated it. He didn't want to watch it
Mhm.
because it was
Yep.
so biased.
Yes.
It didn't say what it was about, everything.
Yes.
But watching it live like I did, I was like, in a way, I thought something was up, but then he took me through. It was like that was a harder hit than what it seemed like, and especially when he wasn't wearing no Hans device, like he was so
Yeah.
naive. Everybody else wore it. He didn't want to wear it because he was stubborn like that. It's like, okay, yeah,
Hmm.
I sort of figured something was up, and then it took later on in the news when I heard that he was being carted off and flown off. Was like, yeah, he's definitely dead.
Well,
Unfortunately,
you don't realize it watching it on TV because the reality is when stuff is recorded on camera, it looks slower than it actually is. So you people forget that when they're watching it on TV, it's like, dude, they're going 180, 200 miles an hour. And a lot of people don't even know what 100 miles an hour feels like, let alone double that, right? So if you hit anything at 200 miles an hour, 180 miles an hour, it's gonna hurt, and it may not look like a lot, but it usually is. So we're and I've heard like in interviews too, like where Jeff Gordon was saying like when he came into it, he was this young kid all about safety, all like hunkered in there, all tight, and then you like look forward and you see Dale Earnhardt like throwing his arm up over the back seat, looking over kind of deal, and you're like, what the heck? So um yeah, and now like you're saying these days the Hans devices are better, the cars are a lot safer with the belt systems, and all those big NASCAR tracks have safer barriers which for
literally,
people which that they don't know what that is, basically you have that concrete wall, and then about a foot and a half, 2 feet
it's
out
a real wall.
is
Yeah.
another wall, but that wall kind of floats, and in between it is styrofoam, so it helps embrace the impact and calm it down. So
Now, my step grandfather also told me, because looking back at it, I thought this too, like everybody else. Even though I knew he wanted his teammates to win, he wanted his teammate to win because he never won a 500, and he wanted his son to try and go for the win. A lot of people are saying he sacrificed his own life. I'm not one of those, and neither was my step
I
grandfather.
don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I think that guy's the
What do you say to
definition.
those idiots that say that? Because there's a lot of idiots. I'm sure you've heard it too. I'm sure you've heard a lot of people say it too, that have seen footage of it. Say the same thing that a lot of these idiots are saying, that he sacrificed his own life to
I,
what
I
them win.
I don't think he would have did that. That guy, and if you look at the definition of competitive
It's him,
athletes,
right? Yeah,
he's up
exactly.
there.
Right.
And the thing is, people don't realize this. And a modern day example is if people watch Formula One, Max Verstappen, people don't like him. They don't like his personality. But you have to be that cutthroat, selfish, almost asshole in a sense, right? To be
Literally.
successful,
Hmm.
especially in motorsports, right? So I think that guy, maybe if it was him and his kid way out front, but I don't think he would have did that. I don't think that Dale Earnhardt, the man himself he was, would have gave it to his son. He would have wanted his son to earn it. And I don't think Dale Jr. wanted to give it to him. He wanted to earn it.
Right.
Because like when you're a kid playing whatever sport it is with your dad or your brother, what's the best part? Beating your siblings or your
Exactly.
parents. So
Exactly.
I don't, and when you hear they give it to you, it kind of takes that away. So
Exactly. I feel you. Like, so let's get deeper involved. So I gotta ask you, you've been in the history of the sport. You know about the history of the sport.
mhm.
Who do you think? And I know I can't say, I'm not going to ask you this, who's the best driver there is of all time. I do want you to break it down in different generations, because I know you've seen footage just like I have. In different generations, I'm going to start with I'm going to start with generations and give you them, and you can tell me who do you think is the better. I'll start with, I'm not going to give you 60s or 70s,
Okay.
but because that's going way back in the footage, and I don't think I've
Yeah.
even seen that. So who do you think out of the 80s is the best driver?
In NASCAR or in racing general?
NASCAR. I'm just going to do NASCAR.
Who was the 80s? The 80s is like, I feel like for me, 90s onwards is really where my knowledge comes in. Trying to think who was popular in the 80s. I feel like it's the Allisons, or was that before their time? For me, that's hard to answer. I'd
Okay,
have to
then
probably go like
I'll
90s
scratch that.
onward.
That's fine. No
Yeah.
problem. I'll scratch that. How about in our era? Oh,
So,
my I don't know if you see this. My biggest fan, Baseball us. Thank you, Baseball us, for chipping in. Richard Petty, what do you say about that? He was 80s.
oh yeah, Richard Petty then. I mean, I didn't know if he was the 70s or the 80s, but yeah, I mean, the statistics don't lie. You know what I mean? Like, he's arguably one of the
I know
greatest of
he had
all
a.
time.
I think he also had a good rivalry too with Yarborough. I think
Yeah,
Yarborough was at that.
Cale Yarborough, and I feel like the Allisons were there too.
Yes,
Um,
and
who
Elliott.
else? Yep, Bill Elliott came in. I feel like Mark Martin was maybe 90s, or he
He
was
was.
late 80s. Was
No,
he?
he was 90s
Okay.
and 80s.
Um, but yeah, there's a bunch like Yarborough, Allison, Petty. All those guys back then were probably like the top three that I can think of. Trying to think. Yeah, I'd
Man,
say those
those
are
cars
pretty.
were different back in the day. Looking back at those footage in the 80s,
Those
70s, and
were
80s, that was
those.
crazy times, wasn't it?
That was the definition of win on Sunday, sell on Monday, because those cars were basically street cars converted into race cars.
Literally,
That's
literally.
You could go in a sense go buy the car that Richard Petty just won the Daytona 500 in the next day,
Yeah.
and make some changes, and you have a race car. So yeah, those things were very different back then.
Now, let's do the generation like you said. Your work before the 80s, which Baseball Us gave us the Petty because I forgot about Petty. The 90s, which was my time and your time. So let's do 90s. Who would you think
Mhm.
is the best in the 90s?
That would probably be between Earnhardt and Gordon. Earnhardt, I think, was earlier in the 90s, and then Gordon came in later, right? So,
Yes. Yes, he did.
um, so yeah, I'd probably say between those two.
Okay.
And Jeff Gordon, like I never saw Earnhardt, right? So it's hard for me to
Say.
really say a lot about it. But I mean, like I said, the statistics don't lie on that. And the reason why I say Jeff Gordon as well is because he was so young in what he raced to, what, 2014 or 15, somewhere around there. And he
Yep.
was still competitive after that. So to be that quick and go up against guys like that at such a young age is a very impressive thing to do.
I could give you my top 5.
Okay.
Oh, wait, here's another one too. He was 80. I think he was late 80s,
Oh,
early
Rusty
90s.
Wallace. Yep.
Rusty Wallace.
Yep.
Yeah.
Rusty
Thank you,
Wallace was a
Base
stud.
Us. I almost forgot about him. He was
Yes.
another one of my favorite drivers. But my top 5, I would definitely say, yeah, Earnhardt for sure is number 1. I hate to say it, I didn't like him as a person because I thought he was cocky and arrogant. But like you said, as a race car driver, you have to be that. Um, yeah, Jeff Gordon is number 2 for
Yep.
sure. Number 3 would have to be it's a tough one. It's between Dale Jarrett and Mark Martin.
Yep. Mark
That's
Martin.
that's between number 3 for me, but I would have to say Dale Jarrett because I'm biased. He's my favorite
Yeah,
driver.
totally.
So 4 then would have to be Mark Martin, and then 5, yeah, probably be Rusty Wallace.
Yeah, Rusty was hella good. His brother Kenny has a podcast as well, and they always talk about stories back in the day with those guys, and it's always cool to hear like the guys from back then when they get on those shows and they kind of tell you stories from back in the day, and you get to hear what they're up to. It's pretty cool stuff.
And now let's do the generation that you're in,
Yes.
2000s. Come on
So
now. There's only
okay,
one, and you know
so
who I'm talking about.
so
There's only one
2000s, statistically Jimmy Johnson.
for sure.
Statistically Jimmy Johnson. I'm gonna be biased because Tony Stewart is my guy. Um, but if you look at it, I think statistically in the 2000s, it's Jimmy Johnson. Tony Stewart's number two because he was the last guy to win a championship before
Right.
Johnson went on his run, and then he
Yep.
was the guy after him to dethrone him. So those are probably your top two. Then you could throw in Jeff Gordon was still up there. I even say Dale Jr. He had 1 year where they should have won the championship. Dale Jr. Towards the end of the 2000s, Kyle Busch, 2008. I think he won. Was it 2008? I think he won like 8 or 9 races.
Yeah.
Like those guys are all super incredible. And then like that was kind of the start, a big transition too, where a lot of those guys like early 2000s to middle 2000s, the guys from the 90s that we talked about kind of transitioned out, and you had this next
Wave.
generation of guys. So you had the Kyle Busch, you had Kurt Busch as well, Denny Hamlin, all these new guys kind of coming into the sport that are, some of them are still there to this day. Martin Truex Jr. So the 2000s, I feel like was a very like there were those guys that stood out, but there's so many guys that that were there that were just as good. They were just getting started though.
Did you? I gotta ask baseball assist real quick. You see Kenny Knox. I know obviously he changed it to a golfer. Did you mean Kenny Wallace as well, or did you mean Knox? What do you mean by that? I don't know if you should see what he said.
I'm gonna say he meant Kenny Wallace, but we'll see.
We'll see. But if you meant Kenny Wallace, I did like him as well. Both Wallaces I
Yes.
liked.
Yes.
I'll throw you a name too. I don't know if you remember him. Dick Trickle. Remember him?
Yeah, that was 90s, right?
Yeah.
90s, yep.
Oh man. I felt bad for him because I don't think he even won a race ever. I can't
Did he?
recall.
I feel like he got one, maybe. I don't know. Maybe they can maybe trying to think. Did Dick Trickle win a race? I feel like he had to have because they talk about him so much.
Now, yeah, that's a big part, like you said too, about nowadays. Before I give you the 2010s, ask you about the 2010s, who's the better. But I gotta ask you, yeah, that's what you're seeing nowadays. The sons of former drivers now coming into the realm.
Yep.
You got the Craven kids coming. Well, one of them, at least.
Quaffles.
Yeah, yeah. You
Quaffle, got Gilliland,
Burton's, yeah.
Blaney,
yep.
Elliott, Chase Elliott.
The new phase.
Why is
crazy,
there no?
Isn't it?
There's another one. Who is it? There's another one. I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to think who it is.
I never would have thought I'd live in this time and era. I never thought, because I'm a big sports guy and I see it in all the major sports too. I never thought where I'd watch growing up in the 90s like I was in any sport, not just alone NASCAR, where I've seen so many athletes that I've watched now have kids playing professionally. It's crazy.
Well, and you know what's crazy for you, because you're older than me, in your lifespan, you will see Dale Earnhardt Jr., and I guarantee you will see Dale Earnhardt's kid race. So that is three generations of Earnhardts, like legitimate generations.
Legitimately, yeah.
That you will see.
Cravens and all that, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe there's an Elliott that does that as well, or I bet you there might be, a Chase Elliott and maybe his grandson or whoever, right?
It's crazy, isn't it? Looking back, like that's crazy. And that's just not NASCAR. That's with any sport.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of with I've seen lots with juniors and all that. It's crazy. I would have never thought in my lifetime I would see that.
Yeah. Well, and I think nowadays, especially in the motorsport stuff, it's getting more common because if you want to make it, connections make it a whole lot easier. And all those dads or the parents that the dads have done it before, they put in the hard work and they got the connections so that when their kids wanted to go do it, they just called up old Rick Hendrick or whoever it is, Roger Penske, Joe Gibbs, who are like, hey, my kid's coming, and they have all the connections from their sponsors back in the day. It definitely makes it a little bit easier for them to go up makes it easier for the kids to go up that route. And, they're learning from the right people from the get-go when they get into racing. They're learning from someone that's become a master of their trade.
And now this is a tough one, because for me this is a tough one too, because I don't really know anymore.
Yep.
Because I don't follow it that like I should anymore. But the 2010s era, who do you think is the better? Because that was transitioning out of pretty much the Jimmy Johnson era, because he won the titles, but
he wasn't the crazy dominant anymore. Yeah. I think the 2010s, like, you could throw Johnson and Stewart in there because they still won championships, right? but
But they were 2000s.
well,
I can't really say that.
Stewart won, yes, and the reason why and obviously I'm biased towards Tony Stewart, right? But the reason why I would still put him in that top 5 list, even though he didn't do the whole 2010s, is the year he won the championship. He won 5 of the last 10 races to go win a championship,
Yeah.
right? And Johnson, he got his 7th championship in, was it 2015, 16, something like that. But
Yeah,
if
somewhere.
you guys, if you took those guys out of it, right? You look at it, you have Kyle Busch, you got to throw in Joey Logano.
Yep.
Um, I would even throw in Brad Keselowski. He won a championship. Carl Edwards, another talented guy that probably should have won a championship, but always had something happen.
Hmm.
Denny Hamlin was up there. Trying to think who other Gordon and Earnhardt those guys were still there, but they weren't as dominant as they were back in their day.
Right.
I'd definitely say the 2010s was like it was Kyle Busch, Logano, Edwards, Kenseth, kind of those guys.
Yeah, Kenseth is kind of tough though because he debuted in the 2000s. That
He
was kind
did, and
of tough.
he won a
That's when he had
championship as
that
well.
run.
Yeah, he won a championship in, was it 04 or 03? I think he won a championship as well.
Yeah, because I know it was tough for me because he took over for I think it was Dale Jarrett, my guy. I
Yeah,
think
because he was at Roush.
yes.
Yes. So
And I forget who took over Martin, but I think Kenseth was the one who took over. No, well,
who took over?
no, no, I don't know who actually took over for Jarrett because you when you think about
Well,
it,
Jared was he was UPS 88, and then he might have just retired. I don't
yeah,
know who.
he just
Oh,
retired, but
another guy
somebody,
from the and I just have another guy from the 90s and early 2000s, Bobby Labonte.
ah,
I
the
forgot about him,
Levantes.
Joe Gibbs.
Yes, I forgot about them.
Yep.
Yes, I was going to say them, but I totally forgot them.
Yes, I forgot about him as well.
The Levantes, Terry and Bobby.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh wow, that's a throwback because
Yes.
Bobby Bobby really wasn't as good as Terry because Terry ended up winning a championship. Bobby never
No, I
did.
think Bobby won it, and Terry. I thought Bobby did with Gibbs. I think Bobby
No,
won it, didn't he?
I don't think so. Terry did. I know that for a fact because him and I think him and Earnhardt had a rivalry going.
So I think Bobby won one later. I want to say. I feel like I'm gonna look really quick. I feel like Bobby won a championship.
Go
I
ahead,
was
yeah, let me know because I know Terry won it for sure in that Kellogg's Kellogg's
So
Chevy
I think Bobby won it in. Was it was it Interstate or FedEx? Let me look.
Interstate. His was
Mhm.
Interstate. His brother
Yes.
was Kellogg's.
He won. So Labonte won the 2000. He won the 2000 championship.
Oh, okay. So before,
And Terry did win one as well, correct. So actually, so Terry and Bobby are both won championships, as well as they're the only brothers, as well as Kurt and Kyle Busch.
so they were the first brother tandem. Okay, that's the
Yes.
first.
And when he won his championship, what car was he in? I'm trying to figure this out really quickly here. Fuck. 2000, he was with Joe Gibbs in the 18 car, which was the Interstate car, I believe. So,
Yes, yeah, because that's what he was known for was the Interstate,
yes.
the number 18, and like I said,
Yep.
number 5, Terry was the Kellogg's. You cannot forget the big old. They're great on the front.
Hmm. That was a good looking car. But yeah, so I think, and then the 2010s, another name you can't drop out is Martin Truex Jr.
Oh yeah. He took over.
Because he was Furniture Row, they won the championship, and then he went to Gibbs and took over for,
Mark Martin.
well, who was it? No, it was he took over for like it was either Matt Kenseth or Carl Edwards, because those guys ended up there. Because Martin was with Roush, and then he went to Hendrick, and then he retired.
Somebody took over for Martin. I know that. I thought it was Truex.
Well, who took? Well, someone took over for him at Roush, and then when he went to Hendrick, so Martin went to Hendrick, And then who took over Mark Martin's deal at Hendrick? It might have been, no, it wasn't Dale Jr. It was Casey Kane took over Mark Martin's ride at Hendrick.
God, that's
That's
a
what it was.
name, throwback name too. And I think
Yeah.
he's still racing. I
He
couldn't believe
races
when I
dirt
saw his
sprint
name
cars.
racing, Casey Kane.
Yep. He races sprint
Wow,
cars.
that's crazy.
So
Still racing to this day. I thought he
yeah,
would have retired by now.
a lot of those guys are. I mean, not a lot of them, but like even Dale Jr., he's racing the Xfinity race right now, Bristol.
Are you serious? I thought he was fully retired.
He does like one or two races a year. When I looked, I think they had
Oh my god.
when I looked, they had a problem, but right now he's running seventh with 12 laps to go.
Chibi Christmas. That dude just doesn't know when to stop, does he?
He had well, the thing is, they always say like, even when you're done, you still get that itch to
But
go
then
drive every
again,
once in a while.
if his daddy was still alive, I'm sure he'd
Oh
still be
yeah, he'd be
racing.
doing some kind of racing, right?
Yeah, that I can't say that. So he got it from his daddy. What can I
Yeah.
say? But like you
So
said, though, you can never stop that itch though. I'm sure most of these drivers still want to drive, so
yeah, I mean, look at like the thing is that a lot of those guys too, when they get older, like they just want to go have fun, and yeah, they're still competitive, but when you're doing it full time, 36 weeks of the year on the road, away from the
literally.
family, for all those guys, you just eventually you get to a point where you're like, all right, I'm done. I've made my money. I want to go enjoy my life and go race every once in a while on the weekend or whatever it is, right?
Now, baseball or us, feel free to ask any questions if you want. I'm sure Mr. Martin is here to answer them if you want. So go ahead and ask any questions you might have, and he'll answer them for you. But yeah, I gotta say, the 2010 era is tough for me because that's when I really stopped kind of watching it because that was in the transition of the next retirement. Oh, here's the question. Here's the question. I
Do
don't know
you
if you see
know?
it.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know.
got it.
Okay,
So, do you want to read it out or?
you can.
Did you know Denny Hanel? He raced trucks. So I don't know him personally, but I've heard the name before on other racing podcasts. I don't know where, but I've heard the name before. So
Now,
I'm trying to think where.
does he mean Hamel or Hanel?
I
Is there
think
a Hanel?
I think there was a Hanel. Yeah, there was a Hanel. Yep. The hell? Let me look. I know the name.
He must be sort of new because I don't remember him. Was he strictly
Well, he
trucks?
he might have just been trucks. Let me look. Or wait, what did he run? Sorry. Yeah, so he competed in the Truck Series in 2003. Um, oh, he's from California. Okay.
See, Baseball does his research. Thank you, Baseball Us. He knew you were from Cali.
Yeah, so he raced, he did trucks, and I think he did some other stuff too.
He was
Actually,
neighbors. He was neighbors with him in fourth grade.
no way.
That's what he say. Yeah. Now he's 58. He's 58 years old.
Okay, I'm trying to
Wow,
figure out.
crazy.
Okay, here we go. Or no, trying to find a little more on him, but yeah, I know he's raced a bunch of different stuff. I'm pretty sure. Let me look here. Or maybe
Yeah.
he just did do trucks, or he did like dirt racing stuff too. Yeah.
Oh, and he was friends with him too.
Hell yeah.
Nice.
It's funny how many people I meet now, and they're like, "Oh, do you know this guy?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't," because racing is such a big industry. There's so many people that do it, and there's so many people that like, "Oh, I know this guy," and it's super cool that there's a lot of people out there that know what motorsports is. Because I don't think in America a lot of people realize what it is. Like I was talking to someone the other day, right? Like when you go to Europe and
Mm,
you walk in, like even as a kid racing a go kart, we walk into a restaurant for dinner, and it was like Tom Brady walked in. Like I'm not. That's what it is over there in Europe. It's racing and soccer, right?
literally, yeah. Yeah.
So like it's cool to hear when you meet people here, like oh, like I know this guy or this guy. It kind of shows that like there are people here that know what motorsports is,
And
and
I guess he chatted with him this week after 40 years. Nice. Nice, Baseball Russ. Awesome.
that's awesome.
That's awesome.
Facebook's a
Well,
great thing.
next time you talk to Hanel, tell him you had on Ryan Martin. Maybe he knows him.
I hope so. He was actually better friends with my brother. That's cool.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. See, you don't hear much stuff like that.
Yes.
Especially me. I never knew who Hannah was. I never even heard the dude before.
There's so many people that try to make it or should have made it based off of talent, but didn't have the resources or the connections. And that's the one
Right.
sad thing about racing. There's so
Right.
many talented people that never make it.
Well, that's just not just racing. That's with any sport in
That
general.
is very true.
Like,
It is very true.
even if I put my time forth and effort into baseball, which I originally wanted to play growing up, if I put my time and effort, I still probably wouldn't have made it anyhow because I never knew anybody. It was just
Yep.
me and my mom. My mom was a single mom.
Yep.
It was just me growing up with her. So I honestly would not have known anybody. So I probably wouldn't have gotten anywhere in it. It's who you know. And that
Yes.
sucks.
Yes. And it's a hard thing, and you just like I knew that like my family doesn't have the resources or the connections to go do what I want to do, right? So I've just taken that on the chin and done everything I can to try and go make those connections happen. And you can't get discouraged by that. You just it's harder, but nothing good in life comes easy. And if it's handed to you, you probably won't appreciate it as much. So
Exactly.
you work
Exactly.
hard for it, you'll enjoy it a lot more.
So now, since I gotta ask you, since you're going to be starting Arca soon, uh, that's gotta be a thrill and excitement for you. But and I know you got coaching too. You said, how are you going
Yes.
to level that with coaching?
So the nice thing is, with the like with our race series, right? What we're doing this year and even next year, let's say you're only racing 20 weekends of the year. So there's a lot of time, a lot of other weekends, but also a lot of weekdays you can go do this stuff. A lot of the coaching I do with drivers for like the car racing stuff are weekdays. You know, these guys they fly out on their private jet to wherever it is. You hop in the car. Sometimes you're with them in the car all day, or sometimes you'll go do a couple of sessions and then you just watch all day and you do data acquisition with them. So it'll still make the schedule work. And with me moving to North Carolina, I think I'll be doing a lot of traveling next year, flying back and forth across the country, which is not a bad thing. Keeps you busy and it'll be good though. I'm looking forward to it. You know,
Now,
we're I,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm a person that does not sit still. I'm always doing something. So the busier I am, the better it is almost.
Now, since you've, like you said, traveled around the country, yeah, I know there are some old NASCAR tracks still around because I saw a
Mhm.
documentary on one that's still in Carolina that they've tried to remodel and they've used quite a bit. They've remodeled it. How many old tracks have you seen around the globe, around the country that are still around to this day that you can literally tell they were former NASCAR tracks? Because I know there's one in Carolina right now where you're at that they've
Well,
used.
yeah,
That
there's one in North Carolina. There's North Wilkesboro, and
that's
then
the one I'm talking about.
that's
Yeah,
the one,
that's what I
and they're bringing back Rockingham next year,
Oh,
which
I
is
love
cool.
Rockingham.
So they
I
just
love that
released,
track.
yeah, NASCAR just released the schedule a couple weeks ago for the top three series. So if I raced that track growing up on like NASCAR '04, '05.
Yes,
So
I
if
love yeah,
ARCA goes there, that is
yep.
on the
I
if ARCA
loved it. Yep.
yes. So if ARCA goes there, that is on the bucket list of tracks we want to try to go to next year, right? Um, but also there's just so many like unique places across the country and not even like big NASCAR tracks, like short tracks too. That like my I guess you could say my home oval track up here is a small track in Stockton, California called Stockton 99. This track has been around since I think it's been around for like 50 or 60 years. And it is a rough diamond, but it is a fun diamond, I guess is the way you could say it, right? And there's so many places like that across the country, like you said, North Wellsboro, Rockingham. Um, and I'm sure there's plenty more tracks out in the Carolinas that once I move out there, that will be more like, oh man, I forgot about this place. Or I remember this place, right? So, definitely there's some road courses that aren't around anymore that I wish there were. But that's just how it goes, right? They
Now,
build racetracks. They build racetracks in the middle of nowhere, and then 40 years later, the city catches up, and people buy houses next to racetracks, then they complain about the sound, and there goes the racetrack.
I don't know how old this documentary was that I saw that they remodeled it, but have you seen the new form of Wilkes Barre,
I
the
have.
one
So last
remodeled?
year, yeah, I have. So last year was 2022. End of 2022, they did a Cars Tour race, which is like what I'm racing right now in my late model.
Mhm,
23 was the first year where NASCAR went back. So that was last year they did their All-Star race. And then
mhm.
they went back again this year. But so 22 and 23, it was on the original asphalt still. This year they finally repaved the surface. And that place looks insane.
It's crazy.
It looks cool because it's like it's a throwback facility,
It
but it
is
looks good.
literally. It literally is.
Yeah. It's
Just
like
like Rockingham. Like I said,
yeah.
we go back to the old NASCAR games. Like,
Yeah.
damn. Now that you bring that up, I want to play those old games, and I wish I had those systems still.
Well, I got to get my brother to ship me my PlayStation. I think that's what needs to happen here because I need to go drive on some of those old tracks, my old PlayStation too.
I
But
know
like,
that's
that's like
crazy.
the beautiful thing with North Wilkesboro is, right? It still looks original and authentic, but it's almost like if you got in a time machine and went back because it's all freshly painted, but the whole style, the theme, everything, it's just super nostalgic, which I think is very like nostalgia right now is a very big thing in modern culture, right?
Now,
You see, go ahead.
no, you go ahead. You
I
finish
I
your
was,
thought.
I was gonna say you see social media pages that are blowing up, and it's the simplest things about like, oh, back in the day, this or that, right? So it's cool to see that in the racing world.
Oh yeah, for sure. Now, like you said, NASCAR obviously based out of North Carolina. That's where their headquarters
Mhm.
are. I think that's where the Hall of Fame is as well.
Yep.
Have you visited the Hall of Fame yet?
So I haven't, right? I haven't been to Charlotte in 10 years. And when I was there for go-kart stuff, it was fly in, fly out. That's how I was when I raced go-karts. We raced 48, 50 weekends of the year. Flew in Wednesday, flew out Sunday night. We were racing. We traveled the world, but you got to see the hotel, airport, some restaurants, and a racetrack. So I'm planning on going back, maybe in December and scouting it out, kind of figuring out exactly the living situation and all that stuff before I move there in January. But once I get out there, I will definitely be checking all that stuff out, and I cannot wait.
Now, when you do make it big, is there a team that you would like to get with? Because obviously, unfortunately, you would like to get with your idol and Tony Stewart,
Mhm.
but unfortunately, I
Yeah.
heard this year
Their last year, Stuart
or
Haas.
last year, yeah, he lost his racing. I don't know if he lost it or he just didn't have the funds anymore or whatever.
Well, I
So,
think what happened was he's doing drag racing now, and that's his main focus. And Stuart Haas, co-owner is Gene Haas, who also is Haas F1 team. So I just don't think their main focus was there
right,
anymore. So they just decided to,
quit
kind of
it.
size down. I think they're still going to run like maybe one cup car, and they still have their Xfinity team, which is cool. But I think Stewart is just pulling out of it completely. So I think they're calling it Haas Factory because, like I said, Tony Stewart's doing NHRA drag racing now. That's
Yeah,
his, which is like that's totally fine, right? He's got what he needed, and he's going to do something different and fun. I mean, he came from IndyCar, went and raced NASCAR, and now he's doing
right.
NHRA, which is incredible to think about. Um, but I guess to answer your question, you're never really picky of where you get your opportunities, right? But you look at NASCAR and you look at the history, and it's especially right now, like if you got a contract in front of you from Hendrick or Gibbs, Penske, those are top tier teams that you wouldn't shut down, or even the new team 2311 with Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan, or Trackhouse. Like there's so many teams, right? But I think growing up watching the sport, it'd probably be like Joe Gibbs or Hendricks, just because if that's the best of the best, and if you want to win, you got to be in the best. So
And I agree with Baseball R Us. Yep, that's exactly what we're talking about. Baseball R Us. We had those games. That's what we're talking about. The PlayStation ones for
yep.
NASCAR. I even had throwback to the old Sega Saturn in the '90s, playing that, playing that old NASCAR.
Yes, there are a lot of old racing games. I think the oldest one we had was F1 2000. Obviously, I'm a little bit younger.
Yep, I
Um,
had that one. I remember
F1
that one.
2000, and then it
Yep.
was NASCAR 04, 05, 06.
Yep.
Oh seven, oh eight, kept going.
Before they
So
stopped making those, yeah, the EA, yeah.
yeah, so I'm
And they
actually sorry, go
they
ahead.
they kind of brought it back too with the newer, but I
They
wasn't interested
did.
in it. I
They
wasn't
brought them
interested in
back
it.
and they're okay. But now actually iRacing is making a console version of the game, which is really cool. So
Who is?
iRacing. So iRacing is a simulator for PC that is a very accurate, high level
Oh, okay.
sim
PC.
racing simulator. But they are
Gotcha.
making a console version NASCAR game.
Really?
Yes. So I'm actually very good friends with the CEO of Electronic Arts. I actually
Oh, there you go.
I coach
There you
him and
go.
his kid in go karts, and built a great relationship with their family. And the problem for them with the NASCAR games was for a company to make a video game, there needs to be a big market. And the
Right.
problem with
Yes. Yes.
racing
Correct.
games, half feel that buy a racing game want an arcade feel, and the other half want a authentic simulator feel. And it's hard to accomplish both of those within one game. So then, you don't sell a lot of copies, or you don't make a lot of
Right.
revenue back. So it that's kind of why they stopped doing it.
I feel you on that. I figured that's why they was stopping it. Yeah. And they, like I said, they brought it back there for a couple years recently. I think it was
Yes.
2K. I don't know if it was 2K or some other brand, but I just wasn't interested in it.
Yeah. So so NASCAR, they had other companies, like smaller companies, make the games, and they were okay. I mean, they're pretty fun.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, I
they're
still play
okay.
some of them. Like me and my racing buddies, we will every once in a while hop on the Sims one night and just go to town. Or I was in actually a sim racing league 2 years ago on one of those console games from like 2019 or 20 or whatever. And dude, we had 35 guys every week racing.
Well,
So
like
they
you
are,
said, it's basically a simulator. Because
yes.
I know I had it growing up.
Hmm.
With the Sega Saturn I told you about, the one race car game I had literally the steering wheel.
Yep.
Yeah, I had a seat just to go along with it.
Yes.
So
100%. Like mine, I'm actually in the middle of moving right now, so mine's put stored away in a locker, but I can't wait to get it set back up because, when that thing's set up, I'll go spend 4 or 5 hours a night, a couple of nights a week in that thing.
like
Just
you said, it helps. Honestly,
yes,
I know a lot of people say
yes.
it doesn't, but like you said, it helps.
Well,
It helps you guys.
yes, because it's not like we're playing football or soccer or baseball where you can just go to the field out back and practice, right? And to go practice in a race car, like to drive a race car, like the stuff I'm racing this year, which is call it lower level stuff, to go run the car a day is anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
it
not
ain't
like you
cheap.
can it's not like you can just go do that any day of the week. So, sim racing, maybe it's not 100% accurate, but it's a very good tool to get you close if you're learning a new track or if you just want to try certain things.
Now, did you ever have? I know, obviously, NASCAR is your stock car is your cup of tea,
Hmm.
but did you ever want to try Indy? Did you ever want to try any of these other circuits, the F1
So
and all that? Did you ever want to try any of those other circuits?
yeah, so growing up watching, very young age, grew up watching NASCAR, and then early 2010s, I got really into Formula One with my dad, and kind of stopped watching NASCAR a little bit. Huge into Formula One and IndyCar, and that's because we would go to the Formula One race every year in Canada. We go to the IndyCar race in Edmonton, where I'm from, every year. So I was really big into that stuff, and then just really like as I got slightly older. Kind of fell back in love with the NASCAR four-door stuff. And even like when I first moved here originally, I was really looking into doing like endurance racing, so like sports cars, Rolex 24, stuff like that, which I'd still love to do.
Hmm.
But the NASCAR route is just it's a really good opportunity in America. And if you want to go racing and you like racing, then that's the series because you're racing 36 weekends of the year. So
Now,
that's why I ended up doing that.
help us with this base bars because I don't know if Ryan remembers this because I sure as heck don't. What was pole position? Was that a game? I
I'm
don't
not
remember.
I'm not sure either. I think it was, but that might have been before me as well.
I can't remember because I just remember, like I said, the EA ones and then the ones on Sega, which was also EA. So that's the only ones I remember. I But yeah, those. I mean, drove back to those games and those old tracks. Like that's oh man, you you threw me back history on those,
Like
especially those two tracks.
Well, and even like some of the tracks that are still around to this day got reconfigured. So it's like it
Yeah,
might be an original.
remodeled. Yeah,
Yeah, so it could be slightly different than what it is now.
literally. Yeah, like Wilkes-Barre, the Rockingham, man. That's definitely even what's the one in crap? What's the one in Arizona?
Oh,
They stopped
Phoenix.
racing. They stopped racing that one for a while, and then they brought that one back.
Yep. But even like the truck series, when the truck series first started, they went
Kansas,
to
yeah, that was one.
oh
Kansas,
Kansas, yep, and Kansas came back, Iowa came back. I think Chicagoland came back, or it's not
yeah,
back right
yep,
now because they're doing a
Chicago,
street
yep,
race
God,
instead.
yep.
Those are some other tracks. Well, I guess Fontana in LA is gone now, so that sucks. Um,
That
that was a
sucks. Yeah, I remember
that was
Fontana. Yep,
that was a badass fast track. Like,
that was
dude, there's
Watkins Glen, right? That was Watkins Glen, I believe, wasn't it?
no Watkins Glen. They just ran last weekend. Was a road course. It's out in New York. Fontana was actually was it 2 mile or 1.5 mile oval in LA.
Oh, okay. Now,
But
okay, I do remember. Okay,
so
now,
so
okay.
so that track was super wide and it wasn't a restrictor plate track. So dude, they would go into the corners. They're 210 miles an hour in a stock car,
Okay,
which
I
is
do remember that
insane.
now.
Super wide, super dust. It's usually kind of dusty because just the area that it's in out there and kind of like East LA area, kind of on the industrial side of it. But that was a cool place. That place just got ripped down like last year, 2 years ago. Um, I think they reconfigured Phoenix. And but then like they've been doing some cool stuff. So like NASCAR the last 2 years, they went to the LA Coliseum. They built
Yeah,
a racetrack, and that
that,
was such a cool event.
and
So
now
it's
that and now they're going to do. Now they're going to do. Obviously NASCAR had a thing in this too with baseball, but did you hear too? Next year they're going to have a baseball game in Bristol.
yep, yep. They've had football games there too, actually.
I don't
Um,
know how you could turn that into a baseball stadium.
well,
The
it's so
Bristol, so
big.
small.
No, Bristol's huge. It's huge in there. Like they laid out a baseball stadium inside of there, and it looks so small compared to what every like. If you look at Bristol on a NASCAR race weekend, that thing's packed. But the amount of land that it takes to host a motor race, call it, or a car race of any sort is it's a lot of land, right? So they did the rendering with what an actual baseball stadium looks like. It's tiny in there.
Yeah, because
Like it looks out of
I'm only
place.
seeing photos right now because of how they've advertised it. It's
Yes.
like it's like okay, I can see where you can get the idea for a baseball stadium, but baseball field in there, but it just the looks. It just
It
feels
looks funny.
it
It
looks
looks funny.
funny, doesn't it?
Yeah. And but the thing is if you look at it, like in Mexico, the F1 circuit down there, they basically drive through an old baseball stadium down there.
Now
And
I
it's
could
so
see now I could see, like you said, with what they did at a Coliseum, because as a football
yes.
stadium
Yes.
slash, track and field, I could see that being in a racetrack, turn
Mhm.
that into a racetrack. But
Yeah.
for a racetrack turned into a baseball field, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I still can't wrap my mind around that. Can you?
I can just because racetracks are big. Like I said, the amount of space, like, most people see the races on TV and they see like call it the track or whatever, and the cars are going so fast that it looks like such a short lap. But when you go to those places when it's empty, like after a race weekend and everyone's left and you're standing there, it is a lot of land. It is a very big piece of asphalt. So I can totally see it. And two, like yeah, when everything's gone and cleared out, there's just you can do whatever you want. Like that's what it is. So I can see it. I can see it. And they've hosted football games there too, actually. In the past, I think like I don't know what state it would be, but for like college football games. So
That's crazy.
so
And
I totally can see it.
by the way, it was PlayStation 1. Thank you, baseball,
Yes,
for
I
us.
saw that. I saw that.
Thank you for
So
letting us know. If there's any other questions you'd like to ask him, please ask away because we're going to be wrapping this up in about 10-15 minutes. Been a pleasure. Thank you again. I'll definitely stay in touch with you for sure.
oh, of course,
I would definitely like to because I like to do
of
that with all
course,
my guests. 'Cause
yes,
I'd like to contact you through this whole journey of yours because
of course.
I know you're going to make it to NASCAR eventually.
Yes.
You got that mindset. Never
Yes.
give up.
So for us this year, we had a crazy year scheduled ahead, and we had a head injury, or I had a head injury, so I've just been taking time to recover from that. So it's been good, a little vacation, and then but also kind of get the head back going, and looking forward to getting things together for next year and getting back on track and really getting after it again. This year has been a good year to kind of catch up on the business side of stuff and make those connections so that we can move forward in the future.
What are you looking for? Honestly, what are you looking forward to the most with this series? I know you got to be looking forward to it because you got to be
Yes. Just
itching
to
for
keep
that.
just to keep moving up the ladder system and get closer to that like end goal and end dream. Like that's realistically what all this is for, right? Like if I can go jump in a cup car tomorrow, I would. But if you want to do it right and you want to be prepared for when you have the opportunity, you got to do it right, which is going through the ladder system and getting that seat time, what we call it. So you're prepared. So I'm super stoked. The cars are different than what I'm driving right now. They're heavier. They got way more horsepower.
Yep.
Because like the late models we're driving right now are like 400 or 500 horsepower. And they're 2,800 pounds. ARCA cars, I think they're 3,500 pounds, so
Yeah, they're
700 pounds
heavy.
more,
Yeah.
but it's 700 horsepower.
TV don't do justice how heavy those things are.
Yes.
Especially when I used to watch Archer because, like I said, of the big names that did it.
hmm
I don't know what they are now, but yeah, I'm sure they're probably heavier or the same.
Well,
But yeah, they're
they,
pretty heavy.
yes, and basically what the ARCA car now actually is cup cars from 10 years ago. So they are the cup cars based off of like 2014, 13, 15. That's what they are right now. They just switched the motor out.
Hmm,
So if you look at one now, you'll be like, oh, that's Jeff Gordon or Kyle Busch's car from 10 years ago.
that's
Is
crazy.
actually what they look like. So like the Chevy is the SS, the Toyota is the Camry, and I think the Ford is the Mustang, but the Ford, yeah, I
Yeah,
think the
Ford is
Ford is the
Mustang.
Mustang.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so it's pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to that. And going to new places too, doing some road course racing will be fun.
Oh, thank you, Baseball Ross, for giving him that.
Awesome.
So yeah, hopefully he knows him. If so, I'd like to
Mhm.
have him on. Hey, maybe talk to Handle too. I'd like to know who this Handle is, and I'd get Ryan on with him as well.
Yeah,
We all have a good conversation.
it'd
So
be cool.
definitely give me his contact info, or you yeah, something, please. I'd like to have him on and have Mr. Martin on, and we can all have a good convo.
It'd be cool to talk to him because like the racing stuff is so like it's such a big world where like when people come and go, that like they'll leave and then the next wave will come in and they'll like not even know who that person is. So I'm sure there's a lot of cool stories that he has
Like
that
I said,
we'd
I
love
didn't
to
even
hear.
know him,
Yeah.
and I was a big NASCAR fan. Like you said, this guy was what, 2003 era, 2000
hmm
era racing trucks. I had honestly, no idea because I wasn't into. I mean, I watched ARCA, I watched Bush. I guess that was the one series that eluded me was the trucks. I guess maybe
Yeah.
because I just didn't feel like I was interested in it or what. I don't know
Well,
what the
I
deal
think
was.
that was the trucks were still new around that time. I think they were maybe only a few years into it, so it was
I
still
think so.
building it
Yeah,
up. Yeah, it
yeah.
was still because I think it started maybe late '90s or right like 2000 is when the truck series started.
I think so. Yeah, and just at the time, I don't know what it was. It just didn't give me interest, and that's why I didn't
hmm
know him. But yeah,
Yeah.
please, definitely baseball us. Give him in contact with me so I can get us on and we can have this discussion. And you can definitely chime in, talk in as well. But yeah, please. Also, like I said, if you see, yeah, Steven, he says, great idea. So yeah, definitely do
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Um, But yeah, if you have any questions, please ask some more. But obviously, there's the one track I would like to ask you about that I would honestly like to go see myself personally because I've heard nothing but great things about it, even on TV as well. As they say, the Run for the Roses is the Indy 500. I would
hmm
love to see that track. Have you been there personally, and have you seen the track?
So I've flown over Indy before. I've done stuff at the other oval there, the smaller one, IRP, but I haven't been to the actual Indianapolis Motor Speedway yet. But that is bucket list to even just go watch the Indy 500. I know a lot of people that go every year, and it's I think like 400,000 people there. Like just insane. It makes any other sporting event in America look silly with the amount of people there, right? Because it's such a big
It
facility.
is. It is. You're right.
And like, I mean, dude, it's a
Stands all
racetrack.
around.
It's
Stands all around.
it's a stands all around. It's a racetrack with other racetracks inside and inside of it and a full-on golf course inside.
Literally.
So like that would be such a cool event. And it was cool to see like this year Kyle Larson do the double or try to, weather affected it.
Yep. I
So
did hear about that. Yep.
so they just announced that he's actually going back and trying it again next year with McLaren and with Hendrick as well. So hopefully next year no rain and he can do it because I think if anyone's gonna win both, it's him.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
So
Without a doubt, for sure.
so yeah, Indy's on the bucket list of places I want to go. Watkins Glen is up there in America. Um, Funny enough, never been there, but I think it'd be such a cool place to go. Is
I think it would be
Talladega?
too. That's definitely a good road course, and it's been for
Yes,
years.
yes, and Talladega, another place I would love to go to.
Oh, for sure.
I
Talladega. Isn't that the one in Alabama, right? I
yes,
believe.
yes, it is. And I was lucky enough. I've been to Daytona a few times. Went there as a kid. Went there a couple years ago. That's obviously such a great facility as well. So those are definitely some bucket list places. Dover, that'd be a cool spot to go check out as well. So New
Now,
Hampshire, actually, honestly, New Hampshire up there too.
yeah,
That's
New
I
Hampshire's
like.
a good one too.
That's
Yeah.
a fun place to go. From what I've
Miami, I
heard.
hear, is a good one too.
Oh yeah,
Miami.
Homestead. So I've been there for karting stuff because they have a go kart track in the outer parking lot when I was younger.
Mhm.
So that'd be a cool one. You know, they run the wall there, which is such a hard thing to do, but it's so much fun. And I just remember the one track that would be so it's the hardest track in NASCAR, but they call it the Lady in Black Darlington Motor Speedway,
And
the Southern 500.
I've even heard this is true too. How do they do this? Tell They even have now. I've seen where they've been racing inside the tracks now with.
Oh, like Rovals. Yes, road courses
Yeah,
inside
how do
Rovals.
they do that with taking away all the fan
So,
interactions with the, like
mhm.
you know what I'm
So
talking about, right?
yeah,
How do they
so
do that?
so basically how those things are structured is they just lose out on a little bit of camping um space with the Charlotte Rover, right? Like it kind of knocks out some of the interior camping, but they definitely like Charlotte is I think Charlotte's the only place they do the Roval right now, but they definitely make up for it with events all week, other stuff, and there's still plenty of camping within the facility.
Mm,
But like if you look at Daytona, right? Like Daytona, when you look at Daytona 500, the infield's packed. But if you also look at Daytona a month before at the Rolex 24, where they run that interior road course, it's just as packed. You know, maybe they just pack people differently on the circuit. So it's not like it affects it too much, but it's definitely like the Charlotte Roval is something that me and my friends love racing on and be something to be really fun to do in real life because it's kind of like driving a street circuit.
but how do they make those into courses though? That's what I'm trying to get. Like, do they
Okay.
just do they
So
like move the whole, take out the whole camping stuff, or how
So,
does that?
so a lot of times they actually have a road. So a lot of ovals, right? So like Homestead, Miami has it as well, where there's actually a road course inside of it there already.
Mhm.
So when they do like the normal, let's say oval weekend, they just park on top of that road course. They just
Hmm.
move the barriers away and they just park on top. And then when it's like road course weekend, they just move those metal barriers back. Or a lot of times they just leave the metal barriers there and people park around it.
See, you learn
So
something
it's
new every day.
yeah, so like Homestead has that, Fontana used to have that, Charlotte has it, Texas has one, Phoenix used to have one. I don't know if they still do. Um, yeah, there's a lot of facilities that actually have that.
And I know Bristol has an NHR track right there.
Yep,
Really
Bristol does.
inside of it.
Sonoma, they have an NHRA drag strip down the center of it, actually. Believe it or not, right in the middle of the track, there's a drag strip.
Mhm.
So we go there every year to the drags. There's a couple other tracks that have Charlotte has it, Vegas has it. I don't think Phoenix has one. So
Yeah, it's crazy. It's honestly hard to believe. Even I think they're even in partnership too with NASCAR. That's why you see those a lot of drag strips, like you said, at these tracks because they're in partnership.
well,
So
it's also very hard to get zoning to build racetracks and drag strips and stuff in America. So when there are lands that allow it, they definitely work together on the and try and make those facilities possible.
God, those I can bring back some throwbacks to NHRA. The forces are a main key stay.
Yeah.
Now you got the daughter doing it.
Yep. And then now you have like the Torrance family, the Capco boys, Ronnie Caps,
Mm-hmm.
the list family, the list goes on and on. So the
On and
Pruitts.
on. That's another thing too, where you see where you remember the fathers.
Mhm. Yep.
Crazy. God damn.
Yeah, those guys would be doing it forever if they could.
So now, like I said, you do some coaching. So what do you honestly tell your kids, and how do you coach them? Because I know a lot of people think it's easy to coach up racing because you're just
Mhm.
racing. That's a lot of people think. But honestly, like you said, it's not really that easy at all.
Well,
So
So
what do you tell your kids?
So biggest thing is fundamentals, right? How to approach a corner, how to go through a corner. You know, you don't ever want to look back. You're always looking forward. And once they kind of get the fundamentals down on, let's say, the driving line and the techniques, from there you push them to, maybe you drive harder in a corner, brake later, maybe you roll more speed, get on the throttle a little bit earlier, a little bit later, and it just keeps building, right? Racing, it's like a Lego building block system. You set your foundation, and from there you just keep building and getting better and better and better. So that's kind of like what we work on. So like a lot of times be like, oh, you're not looking far enough ahead, right? So like you can tell when a driver's not, like, especially when they're new, if they're not looking far enough ahead. And the way I explain to them is, when you're throwing a basketball, you're not looking at the ball at your hand, you're looking at the
Mhm,
hoop. So you need
mhm.
to look where you want to go and look ahead, um, because if not, your driving is going to suffer in different ways. So
Couldn't have said it any better. So I'll leave you off on this question.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, definitely. Again, like I said, I'm going to stay in touch with you for sure.
Awesome, you have
Definitely,
my number.
and you do the same as well.
Of course.
Um, so take us through. You briefly got into it. So take us through. Especially the baseball us who just joined us not too long ago. The ins and outs of the race car. Um, what all the buttons that you have to like what you see
Mhm.
on TV,
So,
and the accelerator,
mhm,
the stick shift, or if there is
yeah.
any. Take us through the whole process of the inside of a car.
So it kind of depends on the series, right? So slightly different. So I guess for our stuff, I'll start off the stuff I'm racing this year. Um, all you have is a gas, brake, clutch pedal, steering wheel. On the steering wheel, the only button for us is a radio button to talk
Mhm,
to our team and our spotter.
mhm,
And then you'll have a knob on the dash which can adjust the brake bias, which that basically means you can adjust how much pressure gets applied to the front or the rear brake of the car when you hit the brake pedal. And
mhm.
that makes the car handle differently when you're on the brakes going through a corner. It might make it turn better, or not turn as good or whatever, right? And then you have an RPM tack, a oil pressure gauge, and a water temp, and that's it. And a lot of the stuff with the shifting, because how the gearboxes are designed, you don't really use the clutch to upshift or downshift. You just only use the clutch to pull off the line, right? So our stuff is usually a 2 or 3 speed on the ovals, but once you get going, you're only in one gear. So you only use those other two gears for like when you're rolling through the pits. And then once you go up, you go to like ARCA and trucks. ARCA stuff, kind of same thing, very simple. There's not a lot of buttons in there. You can't really change much when you're driving.
Mhm.
Even top series cup NASCAR guys, they have more data in the car, but when they're driving, it's not they don't really have a lot of buttons. They might have some data stuff or some more information on the car, maybe the speed or temperatures, or a lap time delta. But in the oval stuff, they keep the cars very simple. Where if you go hop in like a Porsche GT3 Cup car, you have 100 knobs on the steering wheel. Not 100, but you probably have 5 to 10 knobs on the steering wheel that can do a million different things. And where those are, maybe you're adjusting traction control, ABS, you're adjusting a dampener on suspension, wing angles, all this different stuff, right?
Right.
So that's where it gets a little busy. And then, like, if you look at a Formula One car, the supercomputer in that steering wheel alone is more powerful than any supercomputer that has been on any spaceship, airplane ever. And that steering wheel can do 1,000 different things. So those are absolutely insane. And those steering wheels in those cars are, I think they're like $50,000 a piece.
Oh, here's a throwback name too. Oh wow. Thank you, Baseball R Us. You see this?
AJ
AJ
Foyt.
Foyt.
Yep. Still has an IndyCar team to this day.
Wow. Man, that is a throwback name. Yeah.
Oh,
I
there's so many throwbacks in IndyCar and F1 that we didn't even go over. But
Michael
there's
Schumacher.
Schumacher,
Yeah.
Senna, IndyCar. You had Foyt, Andretti.
Oh,
Um,
70s Parsons. Forgot about Parsons.
yep, Parsons. Um,
Classic.
yes.
He was the original mainstay, I say, that I remember, the first one in the highlights.
Hmm.
That was the first one, I think, would be
Yeah,
Parsons.
yeah, and then what? Fabulous Hudson Hornet. You know, it's from
Mm-hmm.
cars, but it's based on a true thing, right? Back in
Mm-hmm.
the day, how the sport was really started. So
Yeah, that's classic. Wow, I couldn't have said any more. If you have any more questions, please let Mr. Martin know before we head off. We're about ready to ship off here in about 5 minutes. So yeah, let us know quickly if you have any more questions, baseball. I appreciate your time. Honestly, I mean, I couldn't have said it. This has been awesome. A lot of throwbacks in there. And yeah, baseball, please definitely give me Handel's information so I can have on Martin as well. So we can all have a good baseball talk. Not baseball talk, but NASCAR. Sorry. Got
yes,
baseball in mind. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, this has been awesome. I can't thank you enough for getting us in depth more into what the NASCAR world is, because I've always honestly, no, for me, honestly, I'm like you said, we when we first got in. For me personally, I honestly thought you guys just honestly drove. Honestly,
yeah,
seriously, that there was no talent whatsoever. But thank
yep.
you for like giving my insight on it.
Let me end with this one little note, kind of referring to what you just said, right? And Denny Hamlin said this in the NASCAR Netflix show. He might hit a 3-pointer that Michael Jordan might miss, or he might hit a hole in one that Tiger Woods would miss. But no other athlete in the world will ever hop in a race car and go faster than a race car driver will. So
Right.
that's the one, like the thing that I learned. If I learned anything from that show that stuck in my head, that was it. And I'm like, wow, that is spot on.
Because yeah, like I said, honestly, I was one of those, like you said at the very beginning. If you remember, we went through that
Mhm.
because honestly, that's how I always thought. And you basically got me off that because yeah, like listening to you, that's pretty much yeah, like what it is. It's you got to have a lot of endurance and skill to go through all those laps. I mean,
Mhm.
because you think 500 laps.
Yep.
I mean, come on.
500 laps in a car that's 140 degrees inside,
No, yeah,
humidity,
no
fire
AC,
suit, no AC.
restricted.
Yes.
I
So
mean,
it gets very hot in there, especially when you have a black race car. It makes it way worse. All my race cars have been black. So,
there you go. Yeah,
so, but
and
no, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope that we can come back on here one day and talk a little more.
definitely, please, baseball or us, give us that information
Yes.
for handle,
And,
please.
and if I know any other people, that I will send them your way too. We can have a couple more other guys on here if you're interested. Some really talented race car drivers as well, that are
Yes, definitely.
very
I'd appreciate
established.
that too. Yeah,
So
if you
I
can
will
do that,
definitely do that.
definitely, definitely. Because I'm always looking for more interviews. You know this. I've told you
Of
this
course.
before we got it on air. But I'll
Mhm.
definitely stay in touch. If you know anybody, like you said, please
Yes.
send them my way. It was fun. Even baseball era said thank you, Ryan.
My pleasure, guys.
So I do appreciate it. I'll stay in touch. It was fun. And you definitely keep grinding. You will get there, and I can't wait to see your journey into NASCAR. I know you will get there the way you've been pushing through all this time, especially with like you said, you were in my shoes, literally, where you knew nobody. It was just you, your dad, and that's it. You didn't know anybody
Yes.
until you got into it. So
Yes.
the grind. I
You.
can't thank you enough, and definitely. It was fun, and I'll send you a copy of the episode for you to listen.
Please do. Please do. I will let me know when it goes up and we'll post it and try and get some more people watching and listening.
definitely. And he says, good luck in your career as well. So definitely.
Thank you so much, guys. It's
I
my
appreciate
pleasure.
it. You have a good night. I'll send it to you,
Awesome.
and that way you can send it out to whoever you want. You can share it as well. I'd appreciate that as well.
I will. Thank you so much for having me, guys. You guys have a great night.
Same to you. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Take care. That concludes this episode of Coffee Time with Byron. I am your gracious host, Byron. Thank you to Baseball or Us for joining us. I appreciate you're always a good watcher. I appreciate you're my number one fan. Keep that. And definitely please send over that info and I'll have Mr. Martin on with him as well. That way we can get this going. Pleasure. Have a good night. Take care, guys.